So even before the Peloponnesian War, Athens and Sparta were city-states that were no saints by any means. In this one, we're going to be going over the worst things or the most questionable things that Sparta did before or during the Peloponnesian War, and then later in another video we'll talk about Athens. But starting us off, we have the agoge. From birth, a child would be inspected for weaknesses, and a weak child had to survive on its own for a bit. It was abandoned. Now, if this infant baby child didn't somehow die whilst being left on its own in some dangerous environment, then it could live until it was 7 with its parents. Everyone else who was deemed to be fit, strong, and healthy at birth could live within the city of Sparta until they were 7, at which point the boys would start the agoge, and girls would get their own sort of education. Not that they weren't living in the city. After they were 7, it's just the fact that at this point, it's very likely that they could very much die, because the agoge was fairly aggressive. Over the course of the next 13 years, they'd enjoy fun events like trading in their shoes to walk around barefoot, and enjoy a bunch of marching. They were forced to wear nothing but a cloak and having their clothes taken away. Even during the winter, when it got, understandably very uncomfortable to do this. The children were constantly encouraged to fight by not just the elders, but also the girls their age would mock them and get them to fight to see who's the strongest and the weakest. If any of the other boys were a bit too fat or a bit too thin, the other boys, the girls, higher-ups, anyone else in society is encouraged to mock, harass, upset, embarrass them in any way, shape, or form. And they get a free pass to do this. Imagine if that was in existence today, if you could do that today. My God, the horror you could unleash on someone if that was still a thing today. But yeah, you got a free pass to make these people's lives hell until they were in proper good healthy shape. Annual events were held for the boys, and there were sort of endurance tests where the boys were whipped and beaten in front of crowds, most likely. Those that survived would receive laurels and gifts like that, but I mean, some of the boys died during this whole process. So, you're getting whipped and you survived, you get laurels, which, okay, in that society, yes, laurels were a bit of a big deal. They were prestigious, important things, right? They had significance, great significance. But I don't know, I don't think it's that worth it, getting beaten near so closely to death just for a crown made out of like a grassy shrub with flowers woven into it, perhaps. And this was acceptable within Sparta. It was annually, it's an annual event, right? So yeah, it's quite, not really looking. I'm sure Child Protective Services would want a few words with the Spartans, assuming that they wouldn't be in any danger of dying, because, Spartans. So one of the things the agoge training saw Spartan boys have to deal with, and this is kind of questionable, was not giving the boys enough food to eat and forcing them to steal from other members of Spartan society, be that the poor helots who really didn't need that sort of problem, or Spartan officers or Spartan citizens. But either way, if the boys were caught, then they'd probably be paddled or beaten in some way, or just punished physically. And yes, a lot of Spartan punishments for these boys that were undergoing the agoge training seems to have been just beating them in some way or another, or just shaming them, or just having them beat each other. Fight, like having them fight each other. So, really questionable upbringing, but I guess to the Spartans, the end justified the means. And they didn't have necessarily any malicious intent behind doing this to their Spartan boys, or their future Spartan citizens. But they still did them. But the boys got an education as well that was fairly similar to the sorts of things that other people around Greece were learning, like, how to read and write, learning about the works of Homer and other poems, things like that. But philosophy was a no-no, a definite no-no. Any education from the Athenians wouldn't be tolerated by the Spartans. Now, as for the helots themselves, they were Greek slaves who couldn't be freed or sold. By the Spartans they were given to, at least. And when you consider the potential backstories for these helots, these slaves of Sparta, they were either a people who were conquered by Sparta, who Sparta simply just took and used as slaves, or their origin is something along those lines. It's not actually concrete or set in stone as to which people specifically were taken. People don't always agree on that, but these guys weren't even Spartan citizens, yet the Spartans used them however they saw fit to use them. If that doesn't scream out to you, these guys were dicks, keep listening for a bit longer, and I'm sure we'll get to that point. And on average, a Spartan would have about 7 helot slaves. 7 helot slaves! How do you use 7 slaves? At that point, you'd probably be able to master the art of doing more or less absolutely nothing. Ironically, it'd be pretty easy to be a philosopher if you had 7 slaves, I'm guessing. The funny thing about this is that the Helots significantly outnumbered the Spartans, so the Spartans were always cautious of the Helots. That, in fact, motivated them to create their own sort of police force, a secret police force. That one of their main jobs was to keep the Helots in check, and they had free reign to kill as many Helots as they could get their hands on. If a Spartan man and a Helot woman had a child and they were a boy, they were given partial free man status. If it was a girl, they were pretty much forgotten about, gotten rid of. Discarded, if you will. Now, you're probably thinking the Helots significantly outnumbered the Spartans, and yes, they did revolt from time to time, but none of the revolts were all that successful or didn't really accomplish all that much, which is, to be fair, quite sad. But could you imagine what would have happened if one of these revolts were successful during one of the critical stages of the war between Athens and Sparta? Because, like, in the original timeline, the Helots survived long enough to just be re-enslaved again by the Romans. So it's like they were slaves for so long and couldn't really escape as soon as they would have liked to. But if the Helots took over Sparta, could they have just called off the war and replaced the Spartan people? Could they have subjugated the Spartan people themselves? Would they have done that? Or would the Athenians just win anyway, come along and just enslave them? History's a funny thing, isn't it? As far as Greek society is concerned, Sparta is considered to have treated the women the best in terms of giving them the most freedoms and the best opportunities to have, the best, most fulfilling lives, in a sense. So, a Spartan woman could walk around her city without a chaperone and go wherever she liked, and that was fine. She could drink pretty much as much wine as she wanted. There was no restrictions on wine and things like that. She couldn't vote. That's doing a lot better than a lot of other women from history. In fact, it's doing a lot better than other Greek women generally. Now, there are still caveats to that. For instance, a woman's primary focus as far as the state or those in power were concerned was to give birth to strong Spartan men or to strong Spartan children. A bride, just before she'd meet her husband, would be chased down by all the other bridesmaids, and then she'd have her hair shaven. Then she'd be fitted into male Spartan armor, and then she'd get to meet her husband. Now, another thing about Spartan women is that they may actually do with their husband before the husband goes out to go to war and before they get married. In fact, they most likely do. So the mother is actually expected to raise the kids more or less on her own for the most part. They might see their father now and then, but yeah, mostly it's the mum that they're seeing. I personally don't know how difficult it is to live in a single-parent family, but, I know it's not easy, so yeah. But I suppose the best perk for being a Spartan woman, in comparison to a lot of other Spartan women, or at least a pretty important difference between Spartan women and a lot of other ancient peoples' women, is just the fact that Spartan women, if their husbands were just incapable of producing children for whatever reason, Spartan women could indeed sleep around, and there was no punishment for this. In a lot of other ancient societies, pre-modern day societies, men would be well within their rights, especially if they're, having a high status like, kingly. They're well within their rights to do some pretty gruesome things to their cheating wives. In fact, not only could these women cheat on their husbands, but they could sleep around with multiple men on top of that, so that's a very distinct difference from the lives of a lot of other women living around previous times and even after that time period as well. Of course, those sorts of activities are still significantly more dangerous for women than they were for men during those days. And of course, women could still die during childbirth. That was still a thing. Though in Sparta, if a Spartan woman died during childbirth, she would actually have a special title placed on her tombstone, or just she would be given a special title. Special epithet. Now, I'm not saying cheating shouldn't be punished in any way, shape, or form, but women got it extremely badly, considering the fact that if a man were to cheat in the same position around the same time period, next to nothing would happen. Especially if they were very high status men. Also, homosexuality wasn't frowned upon. Aspects of it were, but homosexuality itself, interest in people of the same gender, wasn't frowned upon in Spartan society, or in Greek society generally. So it's not as if men weren't potentially cheating on their wives anyway. Or the people who they were making babies with. Now, when it comes to cowards in Spartan society, now just for under the suspicion of being a coward, you were treated very differently by Spartan society. You could be openly mocked, treated with disdain, that sort of thing. And if you were proven to be a coward, you couldn't run for office at all. You couldn't have children or get married. And life pretty much sucked if you were proven to be a coward. Now, that probably doesn't sound like too much of a douchebag thing to have as a rule, but there were Spartans who were considered to be cowards when in reality there was nothing that they could have possibly really done to clear their name other than dying on the battlefield. Specifically, there was this one Spartan who had some sort of issue with his eye, his vision. He lost vision or something was faulty in one of his eyes, and he returned to Sparta, but that was considered to be a cowardly thing to do in his specific situation. So what he ended up having to do is he ended up having to die in glory on the battlefield. So yeah, it's no joke being called a coward in Sparta. Now, the darker side to this is the fact that some Spartans had to actually grow out some of their beard, facial hair, and shave half of it, leaving half of it on their face. So you can imagine how bad that would look. And then they had to wear special cloaks, which essentially said to everyone in society, now if you're a Spartan soldier and you're critically injured on the battlefield, you're probably going to die anyway, as you'd expect. Even if you only get like a minor injury, or you lose like a finger or something and you're incapable of holding one of your weapons, so you're probably dead because you can't really defend yourself like that. And so many things could kill you on a battlefield like that. And also there was a no surrender, no retreat sort of mentality for the Spartans as well. So a lot of Spartans would meet their end on the battlefield itself. Now, whether you want to consider that a sucky point for Sparta or sort of a glorious sort of honor thing, I guess that's up to you, but then again, dying is dying, so I guess that sucks. Now, arguably the worst things that the Spartans did, besides what they did to the Helots, because, you know, making an entire people or entire city your slaves is pretty high up there on the douchebag scale. But the other really big dick move that they did was, after they won the Peloponnesian War, instead of destroying Athens, crushing the city, leveling it to the ground, they tried to change the mentality and the very essence of Athens itself. We all know that Athens used a system of democracy, but what the Spartans did was introduce their own oligarchy of about 30 rulers who were sympathetic to the Spartan cause. They had Spartan ideals, and that was part of their strategy to essentially change Athens into more of a Spartan-like nation. Most people saw many of their rights disappearing, and those rights were given to about 500 or so counselors who were former Athenians. And they also took 3,000 men from the Athenian people and put them into the Athenian government, or, you know, shared with them some of the government's power. They also introduced 300 lash bearers into the city to promote fear and to keep people in line. I suppose you don't need much imagination to realize what people would do with a lash. 300 of those people. And a lot of popular Athenians who opposed this new regime probably saw the empty side of a poisoned hemlock bottle. Keyword there being poison. Now, eventually the Athenians did revolt and got their city back, but that was 13 months later. So this went on for quite a while, and yeah, Spartans were kind of dicks. But they had some positive points to them as well. All bad. I suppose it was mostly bad, mostly draconian, but in some ways, you know, they were better than the Athenians. Like the fact that people from all over Greece would send their children, like their 7-year-old boys, to Sparta to receive the agoge, that sort of training. It was that renowned, it was seen as that good, because Spartans, the actual Spartans that were part of the Spartan army, in comparison to a lot of other armies, there weren't that many Spartans, but it was a fairly effective or fairly renowned army. But yeah, that was more or less the video on the Spartans, and more or less the worst things that they did, or just how bad they were. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave it a like. And as always, if you're new to the channel and want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel. But until the next video, have a very good day. I have been Prime, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.